Dear colleagues of the Consul Corps, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, welcome to the 4th Annual Global Trade and Investment Symposium here in Macon, Georgia. This is an event that is put on in conjunction with Global Atlanta. Wesleyan College is our host venue, and my law office, that of Christopher Smith here in Macon. We don't really have enough time to go through all of the protocol needed to identify all the luminaries here tonight. So if you don't mind, not going in order of precedent, if the members of the Consul Corps could please stand to be recognized. I can call you out in order later. I know how to do it. I also, at this time, would like to recognize any representatives of federally elected officials here in the House tonight. There we are, from Congressman Scott's office. Yes, thank you. And I do believe we have some local elected officials here tonight. There we go. Mr. Vice Chairman, thank you for being here. Now, a lot of you know me as attorney, but a lot of you don't know me at all. But others know me as the Honorary Consul of the Kingdom of Denmark, which I've proudly served for 17 years. I would be remiss in my duties if I did not mention Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands, which are part of the Danish realm. Established in 1802, the Royal Danish Consulate is the oldest consulate in Georgia. And we've been here ever since. So there's been a Danish consulate here longer than there's been a mayor of Macon or Atlanta because they didn't exist. And I want to toot Denmark's horn a little bit more because Danish companies, there are about 60 of them here in the state. That relationship supports about 4,200 jobs. Now, if you work for a Danish company, would you please stand? And if you could remain standing. If you work for a foreign-owned company, would you please stand? Thank you. If you are involved in exporting products from the state of Georgia abroad, would you please stand? Thank you very much. Folks, in the law, that's what we call demonstrative evidence. That shows what this event is about. It's about promoting global trade, global investment, exports, as well as American investments abroad. And I will say that foreign investment is responsible for about 287,000 jobs in this country. We want to promote that bilaterally. Now, you didn't come here tonight to hear me speak, so I will turn it over to Drew Davidson of Wesleyan College to give you a warm welcome to this lovely venue. Thank you, Drew.
Well, thank you so much. I'll be very brief. I just want to say on behalf of Wesleyan College, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Drew. I'm the Vice President of Enrollment, Marketing, and Communications, and we're just so happy to have you all here today. I know we have a couple of students who are here, and this is such a great opportunity for them to really interact and hear about your leadership all around the world and in global trade, and really hearing what they can do too. So thank you again. Thank you, Chris, for putting this on. We really appreciate it. Thank you to Global Atlanta. Really appreciate all of this, and welcome to Wesleyan College. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Trevor Williams.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. So I'm Trevor with Global Atlanta. Know a lot of y'all, don't know a lot of y'all. I'm very excited to get to know all of you as much as is possible through this event. Like Chris mentioned, this is the 4th time we've had the privilege of doing this. The first time we started at the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, and have to say that Wesleyan College former president, Vivian Fowler, came up and said, why don't you do this at Wesleyan? And so we've been here ever since, and I don't think we're leaving. So can't get rid of us. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Global Atlanta, why Global Atlanta is in Macon right now. As you know, Georgia, economic development in Georgia is a statewide endeavor, as much as there is always perceived separation between the various cities. We, as a publication, really cover Georgia and the Southeast as much as we can. Of course, we don't chase stories across state lines that much, but we have to understand how the industries all work together. If you're in aerospace, if you're in automotive, if you're in any sort of manufacturing endeavor, you're most likely going to be working across a value chain that does not stop at the state's borders, and indeed does not stop at our national borders usually. Most companies are sourcing something from overseas, or they're selling overseas. If you drill down into the value chain, you're always going to find these international connections, and that's really what our publication is all about, and that's really what this panel is going to be all about. We always say we're not, as a publication, trying to create anything. We're really just uncovering things that already exist and that many people don't really know exist, because we tend to be sometimes insular in our country. And so tonight is an exercise where we're coming together, we're being intentional about showcasing these connections. And really in many ways, it's a time that you could easily be forgiven for being skeptical of international engagement, right? There's a lot going on in the world that might make us a little hesitant to engage. Wars and protectionism and trade wars and physical wars and everything else. So we thought this could be a sort of celebration or a showcase of really the opportunity of international engagement and global trade. So I'm going to ask our panelists to come up behind me and go ahead and get to your confined space back there where we won't let you escape from all the hard questions. And we'll go from there. I'll start to introduce you. Thank you so much for joining us and coming down or over as the case, or up as the case may be. So I'm going to start. I may sit down, I may stand up. I haven't really decided yet. We're going to start with Ambassador Luis Claudio Santos. I'm not going to try to do the whole name like I did last time. I think I messed up on that before. But Ambassador Santos is the Consul General of Brazil in the Southeast U.S., based in Atlanta. He is called Ambassador Santos because prior to coming to Atlanta, he was posted as Ambassador to Nicaragua, Brazil's Ambassador to Nicaragua. So we talked a lot about that in our latest Consular Conversation event. He was gracious enough to join us for up in Atlanta, and we'll have that story for you soon, so check out Global Atlanta. And you can read, so I'm not going to read his bio, but one of the best parts about Ambassador Santos is his the fact that he's a historian and biographer and has written a lot about Brazil's diplomatic history and poets and all kinds of various influential figures. So I can't remember the order, so go to the next one. Yeah, Regina. Regina Maddox is the executive director of Next Generation Manufacturing. People often say she's probably the most connected manufacturing association representative here in Georgia. And I think at last count, I don't remember, but I think at last count it was like 720 factories that Regina has visited in Georgia, which is astounding. I've been to probably 40 with her, always getting Chick-fil-A milkshakes on the way back. But you know, what we found in our travels together, and what Regina is so great about pulling out is, like I said earlier, all of these connections with the world. So definitely check out Next Generation Manufacturing. You'll hear more from Regina. I think we're going to Mike. Yes, Mike Schiavone, 20 years of aerospace and defense experience. He works at TERMA, and TERMA is speaking of foreign/Danish-owned companies, TERMA is a Danish-owned company. And Mike's had a long Scandinavian journey. Previously worked at Saab on the defense side. And we're going to hear more from you. So thank you. And then Reggie Zandonade. Is that right?
Yeah,
close?
that's right.
No falo português. I'm sorry. So Reggie comes to us all the way from Valdosta today. But his company Forquímica is a Brazilian-owned fertilizer and adjuvant and other kinds of chemical provider. He'll tell us what it actually is. And working in the agricultural field, and invested in Georgia five years ago. Been here a long time, but 5 years ago officially. And I don't know if I've told you this, but I watched your video that you did at the the Ag Expo in Moultrie. And that's where I first really understood what Forquímica actually did. And people were going by on a tractor and like stopping for like Shark Tank on a tractor. It was really cool. You were like pitching to them, which I love. So I want to Sunbelt Ag Expo. I want to come down there and see you at some point. So this is our great panel. I'm going to ask each of them to tell us a little bit about themselves so that they can get over my introduction and tell a little bit more about what they do today. So maybe start going backwards with Reggie. Tell us a bit about Forquímica, first of all, and what brought you to Georgia? Because I think people will tell pretty soon you're not from here.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, it's a pleasure to be here today and talk a little bit about the company. As you can see, my accent, I'm from Brazil. It's not hard to tell. And I work for Forquímica since 1997, so it's been a long journey with the company. And I was here in the U.S. before, and when Forquímica decided to come to the U.S., I was chosen to come and do all the research. And I mean, we didn't know where to go. They didn't know where to go, so I did all the research, and I fell in love with Georgia. So here we are.
I love it.
Yeah.
I want to come back to what you did to research this location, because tell everybody where it's in Moultrie, right?
Yeah. The company is located in Moultrie. It's for those who doesn't know, you go 75 all the way down. When you think you're getting close to Florida, you turn right and you'll be there.
Yeah. So I want to come back to you about the story of how you fell in love with this part of Georgia, because it's not a place where Brazilians are often found.
The company started with, the company in Brazil works mostly with soybeans and corn, and it's not what we have here in South Georgia. It's more peanuts and cotton. Mm-hmm. And so I did all the research, and so I came to the U.S. in 2015 to look on site to see what was going on. So I came first to Florida, and then came to Georgia, and then went to Alabama, and I was going to go over a little bit more, but then I said, you know what? I don't need to go any further. I'll go back to Georgia and research a little bit more.
We're just glad you came over the border, because a lot of Brazilians get stuck in Florida and they don't get far enough north. So I'm going to come back. I want to come back to you. I'm going to get Ambassador to tell us a little bit about the Brazilian connections between Brazil and the Southeast U.S., because that's really your wheelhouse. That's what you do every day. And tell us a bit about your journey here recently.
Okay, thank you very much. To begin with, I'm a career diplomat. That means that my job description is very, very vague. You stay in some city for 3-5 years, then they send you to another city. You don't have any control about that. And also you change your job description, because in the embassy you deal with political issues, whatever, and on consulates we deal with consulate issues, but also with trade. And you also deal with trade in embassies. All embassies has trade sections to help Brazilian businessmen to sell in the country you are, to help export from Brazil to that country, and to promote investments from that country in Brazil, and to help Brazilians to invest in that country. And being in Georgia, to begin with, was a little bit of surprise. Before being in Georgia, I lived in the U.S. 2 times, in New York and in Washington, D.C. And I've never been in Atlanta on those occasions. So I accept the city without never being here, and I'm very, very glad that I accepted. I'm very, very surprised by the city, by the state. It's very nice. I'm very happy, and I'm loving the food too, because it has flavor. American food sometimes don't have that much. So I love Southern food, and I'm enjoying a lot Georgia and Atlanta especially. About investments in Brazilian investments and Brazilian trade to Georgia, we have a very, very healthy relationship, Brazil and Georgia. If you take Georgia as a country, I will not suggesting that, because it's going to be a complicated issue. But the trade between Brazil and Georgia is more than $2 billion a year, with a good surplus for Brazil. The trade between Brazil and the U.S. is around $90 billion a year, with a big surplus to the U.S. So I love Georgia. And it's good for my job, it's good for my career. And besides, We have a lot of investments here. It was mentioned some countries that has 2,000 whatever jobs created here. Brazil creates at least 12,000 jobs for Georgians. So Brazil has a very range of investments from airplanes. Yes. Embraer there is a pride for Brazil.
Here in Macon.
When I talk to audience here in the U.S., I always say, you don't know, but you all have already traveled in the Brazilian airplane, and that's true. Yeah. So it's a proud for me to have my colleague from Embraer here, but not only airplanes. We have good strong investments, for instance, in poultry. A very American name brand, Pilgrim Pride, Brazilian. Okay.
Owned.
So we have a lot of investments, we have a lot of interest, and that's growing. Up to now, Florida is the state in the U.S. that has more Brazilian investment, but I'm working on that Georgia could surpass Florida. That would be very good for me too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well,
thank you very much.
I just wanted to mention too. I mean, it's a very, like you said, it's a varied industry base. I mean, it's not just one sector. It's not just agribusiness. We've got Guidoni Group, which is up down the road in McRae, which is making granite countertops. There's CZM in Savannah that has construction equipment. There's a lot of financial technology companies. There's Taurus making guns and Bainbridge. I mean, there's all kinds of types of investment, and it goes both ways. Our first symposium, we had a representative from Cayman, which anybody from Macon will probably know that company, exporting kaolin clay around the world, and they own a huge kaolin production mine in the Amazon that they purchased from a Belgian company. So there's just so many connections that we don't know about until we uncover those.
Yeah, there's investments in Amapá, close to the French Guiana.
Yeah, and apparently Middle Georgia and this area of Brazil are the two biggest deposits in the world of this fine white clay. So never know what kind of trivia you're going to get out of this night. But we were talking about aerospace. I want to bring Mike in. Mike is with TERMA, and tell us a bit about what TERMA does.
Yeah, TERMA is a Danish-owned aerospace and defense company. We're headquartered in the U.S. The U.S. subsidiary is in Atlanta. We have a large presence in Warner Robins, just south of here. We primarily produce electronic warfare self-protection systems. Sounds confusing. It's basically the equipment that goes in the aircraft that alerts the pilots when there is a missile coming at the aircraft, and it allows the pilots to deploy countermeasures, whether that be chaff or flares, etc. We also have a radar business that we deploy commercially and to the government. We do a lot of coastal surveillance, so surveilling coasts, ports. We actually have a radar in South Florida that the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office uses to catch bad guys and girls that come over either smuggling drugs, or they actually have used it to find human trafficking. And so that's an important project for us as well.
For sure. Yeah, and I want to come back to all of that and get into how we actually sell that, especially being a foreign-owned company. We'll talk about that. I want to go over to Regina. There is a mic there. Yeah, so we'll use this mic for this table, that mic for that table, and I'm going to keep this one if y'all don't mind. Regina, we're here in Macon, robust manufacturing ecosystem all throughout the state, but especially here. We were talking on the way down just about how many companies we still need to visit here. So I was wondering, can you tell me just how international or foreign-owned companies or internationally engaged Georgia-owned companies, how has that become a bigger part of what you've been doing in recent years?
Of course. And I do want to share just a little bit about our organization.
Yeah, sure.
Next Generation Manufacturing is a manufacturing association. We're not a membership organization, but all of our participants are manufacturers of all sizes and all verticals, everything from aerospace to zippers to metal forming, anything, food production, you name it, we probably have met them. We have actually over 2,000 participants from throughout the U.S., every state, with the exception of Hawaii, and I'm very happy to be here. I actually haven't ever been to Macon just for a meeting. I've only ever been here to visit manufacturers, so this is very unusual. And as Trevor mentioned, we usually end with a Chick-fil-A milkshake, so I'm really hoping that's still part of the deal on the way back. But the question that you asked me was how international.
Yeah, how is it? I mean, you started, what, 10 years ago with Next Gen?
Yes, we've been around 11 years.
Employee of the Year every year since then.
Every year.
So how have you seen the international ecosystem grow in terms of manufacturing since you started?
Absolutely, and this is actually a two-pronged. At least this is my perspective of it. The companies themselves, there's one side of it, and that is the employees of the companies are very international. I don't know how many of you have actually been in a manufacturing facility, but if you haven't, typically there are two things. One is an American flag on the floor, no matter the ownership of the company, as well as something symbolizing the companies or the countries of the employees and the team members of the manufacturer of the team. And it doesn't matter. There could be 30, there could be 130, depending on the size of the company. And they're very proud of that. Very proud to say, hey, we're made in the USA, and look at the breadth and the dynamics of the diversity of our team here. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, yes, the diversity and in not only supply chain, but also in just the business and the business opportunities. One of the things that happened, I think we all kind of look at time now as before COVID and after COVID. Prior to COVID, manufacturers had really started looking at themselves as companies that that perhaps realizing that 85% of the world's customer base is outside of the U.S. And during COVID, it became intensely aware that a company must think of themselves as something more than just and this is not a real company, but then as a metal fabricator in Louisville, Georgia. You have to think of yourself as a global company. So that's really a huge mindset shift, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to come back to Reggie about that, because if you don't mind grabbing the mic. How did you decide that Forquímica needed to have a presence here in the Southeast U.S. or in the U.S. in general? Why not just export into the U.S.? Why did you have to have a physical presence here?
Yeah, just finishing before why Georgia is there are two main things that we came to Georgia. One of the things is the logistic, because we're close to the port, close to coming back and forth from Brazil with airports, so it's close. And the other thing is the southern hospitality. Yeah, that's something that everybody says, and when we came here, we say, yeah, there is the southern hospitality.
Well, and Paraná, the state where your company's based, is in the south of Brazil, right? So,
yes,
I mean,
that's
maybe
correct.
maybe that's it. I don't know.
It's kind of, yeah.
I don't know, but why did you need a physical presence in this country instead of just exporting into the market?
So first we decided to bring the products from Brazil here and sell it here. But then we saw that we had many problems bringing from Brazil, like shipping from Brazil. You get a container and it's chemical products, so you get heat, and so it's not the same. We had problems with the chemical products when we got here. And another thing, we need to have something here made in America to the Americans. It is different if you make it here, because you have to adapt it to the American agriculture. So
is that mainly about the crops themselves, or is that more about the perception of the market?
Yeah, both. It is both, because the crops is a different climate, everything is different. And the perception of having a company here, I mean, you have the products when you need it. And especially like Regina said, after COVID. Exactly. During the COVID, we had a lot of problems with like raw materials. We have a shortage on everything. So, and when you have the factory here, it's different. Different story. We have the products here.
Yeah, you can match it better to the local demand.
Yeah, you can adapt different products to the culture here, to agriculture.
Well, I wanted to bring Mike in on that same point. I'm imagining that you don't manufacture here in the U.S., right? Like
We do some
You do?
manufacturing
Okay.
in Warner Robins.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask you about that because I know that defense is a very sensitive industry, right? And what you do is going to be highly regulated, highly precision engineered, I'm sure. So, tell us about that value chain that TERMA operates, and how much of it do you have to have here versus in Denmark, et cetera?
Yeah, exactly. Well, TERMA started in the U.S. from the Danish parent because TERMA in Denmark was selling parts to the United States Air Force for F-16s and A-10s aircraft. And when they needed something repaired, it took too long to send it back and ship it back over. So that was the genesis of creating an office in Georgia, actually, and specifically in Warner Robins because of Robins Air Force Base down in Warner Robins. Then it expanded because, the U.S. military has their classified equipment. And think of that as the special sauce or the proprietary information that the government does not want outside of the United States. So that has to be done by U.S. companies. So then it expanded to supporting and creating variants of equipment and new technologies by Americans in Warner Robins and in Georgia that serve different aircrafts.
Wow, amazing. And can you explain a little bit about, without getting too deep into the weeds, how the regulatory environment affects you? Like what defense regulations you have to abide by in order to sell into this market, and being a foreign-owned company? Because right now, as everybody hears every day, anything that is, even things that are not national security are national security now. Even if it's steel or aluminum, of course, these are, if you peel back the layers far enough. But all of these things are being politicized, and I just wondered, how do you do that as a Danish-owned company? Is it just because we're so closely allied with Denmark?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of regulation in the industry. A lot. I mean, it is a full-time job, full departments to make sure that you're compliant with things like international traffic in arms, ITAR. There's obviously the secret, classified component of it. But oddly enough, the F-35 fighter jet that Lockheed produces has essentially 8 other countries that have put money into the development of that aircraft and have suppliers in their countries, NATO countries, that have components in that aircraft. In fact, an F-35 fighter jet has 1,800 suppliers in their supply chain. And it is although built by Lockheed Martin, final assemblies in Fort Worth, Texas, many components are brought in many different countries. So there are a lot of rules and regulations. What's coming up lately is China, making sure that you do not source certain components from China, especially electronics. So that's a national security risk. And the biggest thing is to have a really strong compliance team and be up on the rules that are constantly changing because of certain threats around the world.
Yeah. Regina, I was planning on going to the Consul General, but I wanted to ask you, you had a really great panel at your annual event recently about that very issue with the 2 aerospace companies. I didn't know if you wanted to throw in anything from that.
No, we actually did. I'm sure you saw me shaking my head. We had 2 companies that, and I was actually sharing this with you earlier. One is a company called thorniest, and one is Atomic 6, and they both are entrepreneurs and what one might consider startups on 2 separate ends of the spectrum. They're both interesting follows, as are all of these companies. But if you're interested in an entrepreneurial, high growth company and watching them, it's kind of like the American dream coming alive. Thorniest is the name of the one company. We hosted a group tour of their facility in January, and it is amazing to see actual R&D at work. To your point, all of the criteria that must go into meeting requirements, regulations, and just making this engine that is designed to take the human being to take the passenger from New York, and this is just one example, from New York City to London in 90 minutes. This is the engine that they're building, and they have a lot of funding, and they have a lot of attention right now. And it's a major company. It's a company to watch. And then Atomic 6 is one of their suppliers. And tour, of course, to your point, anyone who wanted to go on this tour, there was a lot of criteria you had to go through. It was probably the most administrative heavy one. But there's a lot of sexiness to something like that, and people get really interested in it. And I think that was probably the tour, as many of you all would ask more questions than most on most.
Yeah. Well, I guess the reason I brought up the point is because it shows the challenge, really, of doing international business. I mean, this is one highly regulated sector, but pretty much any sector you're going into has some sort of compliance aspects that you have to go into. And many of the companies that we go visit, they have not quite yet invested in that infrastructure, from a personnel perspective to make sure they're doing that, abiding by those regulations and everything. But you quickly realize, to your point earlier, 95% of the consumers being outside the U.S., you need to figure it out. So I wanted to ask Consul General Santos, what's sort of the, Brazil is known to be a highly regulated market, but also a very good market once you get in. How do you see companies here thinking about it? We've got companies like NCR, Novelis, all of the big Fortune 500 companies in Atlanta and Georgia are active there. How do you see it as a market, and how are you promoting it? Particularly now we're on the other side of a recent election, and you're looking at a new administration, a new time to start promoting business.
Yeah, as you said, it's a very good market after you get in. So first you have to have an effort to make an effort to get in. Brazil is still I would not say very close, but still a closed economy in some sense. And like the U.S., like any country, there's a lot of regulations, and like the U.S., is a federation. So you have not only federal regulations, but you have state regulations and everything. But anyhow, Brazil is open up, and that's a historical trend that will not change by changing the government. And people don't have to be afraid of the new government, because Lula governed Brazil for 8 years. The Worker Party governed Brazil for 13 years. And in this time, Brazil grew a lot. The trend to get an open economy continues, up and down. There are special interests there, here, anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I have to say now, the government is very new. The President Lula will be meeting President Biden tomorrow in Washington, so there will be a good opportunity to discuss bilateral matters. I don't have any insights on that, but that will be very good. And I think that the relationship between Brazil and the U.S., the trade relationship and the political relationship, it will improve anyway. It's a kind of inevitable thing, because we share a lot, and there are many things. For instance, even culture. It's very complicated to invest in a country that, besides the regulations, everything has a very, very culture that's very, very distant for yourself, for your own country. So I think that looking on the long range, it's inevitable that we're gonna get together and much more investment, American investment.
I've noticed as well that it seems like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like more Brazilian companies are looking to globalize further. I mean, obviously the big ones are already doing it. Embraer's been doing it forever, but it seems like there's a more aggressive stance by companies looking outward, particularly to the U.S., particularly to places like Georgia. Is that feeling? Do you think that feeling is correct, or do you think
the feeling is correct, and that's natural?
And please use, if you will, the recent IPPE show where you hosted 35 companies. As an example of that.
Look, the trend is real, and the trend is logical. You used to have a very closed economy, so you don't have to be very, very competitive to put your products in that market, because you have a lot of protection. Since your opening your market, and that is a trend that will continue. You have to be more productive. You have to be more competitive. And the moment you aim this, you also aim external market, because that's the way that you're going to be competitive in this world today. So there is the trend for internalization of the Brazilian companies is something that will continue and going to get stronger. And that's good for Georgia, because I think Georgia is a good place to start. And as my friend said, even if you want to export products, it's much better for a company to have some facility here, some representative here, because that give to the consumer comfort. That's help to improve your image in the market. So that's very, very important. So I think will continue.
Reggie, have you had any cultural issues in terms of hiring or in terms of sales when you're approaching the market?
Yeah, that's something interesting, because when you are in Brazil, what you hear over there, not nowadays, but like 8 years ago when we started, people always say, oh, Americans don't like Brazilian because this or that or blah, blah, blah. But when we came here, every time I say I'm from Brazil, I get a smile. And people say, yeah, Brazil is a nice country. It's a beautiful country. So, but yes, there is a little bit. The American will prefer American-made instead of foreign country. Yeah, that's true. So when you have your facility here and you sell American products to the Americans, they will accept better. And they're right. Yeah, I'm not saying they're wrong. Yeah, I mean, I would do the same if I was in Brazil to choose from Brazilian country to American country.
I was going to say, a lot of that is very similar to how to Brazil's market, right? Like
that's correct. That's correct. But as far as culture, I think for the Brazilian company to understand a little bit the market here, that took a little bit more time. To understand.
And I wanted to bring in workforce issues, right? Like you've been trying to hire but having a lot of trouble, and I want to have Regina talk about that too. But tell us about, because I'm sure a lot of the companies in the audience are struggling with the same thing. What are you going through right now in terms of trying to hire?
We have had a lot of problems last year. We need the workforce. We had a company who would provide us the workforce, so we were not hiring. And so we would send an email to the people and say, oh, we need 2 people tomorrow, or 3 or 4. And they would send us 1 or 2. And I was telling Trevor, the first person that came, he came and worked in the morning till lunchtime. He went for lunch, and he never came back. Maybe he'll come tomorrow. But it's been a year.
Yeah, he ain't coming back, Reggie. I'm sorry. No, but I think everybody's going through this. I mean, Mike, are you more insulated from this, given the types of people that you're hiring, or what?
No, I mean we have the same hiring challenges, different people, but we're hiring a lot of engineers, software engineers specifically, and that's hard talent to find. A little bit easier in Atlanta, harder in Warner Robins, but the job market has been so strong for the last few years that it is very difficult to find engineers. But also for the type of work we do, it's very niche. So we actually prefer to hire engineers that have aerospace and defense industry experience or have worked for the military, maybe on aircraft, repairing aircraft, as that's a good skill to have too. But it is very hard to find in this labor market.
Do you find yourself having to go overseas to recruit on certain occasions, or are you able to find most of your folks locally?
Yeah, it's a little different business model because for the classified work we do, you do have to be U.S. citizens. So we try to hire here. We work with Georgia Tech quite a bit. We work with Mercer, and we a lot of times we try to get people to come from the north to the south. Like me, I'm from New York State, and just like you said, good food down here and good weather, and try to entice them to come to Georgia. But it's certainly been a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Regina, did you want to talk about some innovative ways that manufacturers are addressing this issue? And then I want to actually come back to Mike to talk about Scandinavian culture as well, since we're here. Go ahead.
No, actually, you're right. Workforce has been, if it isn't the number one concern, it's been 1 and 2 for a long time in manufacturing. So, and there's been a trend, or actually a shift a little bit, because a few years ago, we started having the conversation with manufacturers to consider alternative workforce pipelines, whether it's folks who are formerly incarcerated, adults with disabilities, legal refugee community, and the homeless population, and many more. There are organizations that work with them, and we have partnered with them and actually connected very successfully a lot of manufacturers with those organizations. The shift, people used to politely, kind of nod and say, oh, thank you, I'll get back to you, I'm maybe interested. And in the past few years, there have been more and more and more companies that have said, absolutely. And there are so many success stories. If anyone is interested, please let me know. I am very happy to connect you with those folks. There are a lot of very viable, very talented, highly skilled individuals out there who are looking for work. So that's one side of it. The other thing is there's been somewhat of a shift as well, and we had a conversation at our annual event, as Trevor mentioned, about this as well, and that is the shift, the uncertainty of the economy, if you will. And some manufacturers, while they had forecasted considerable growth, that growth now may be more in a different way. Perhaps it's maybe more automation in a different direction. So they have tried to find ways to perhaps make more strategic hiring. So what we've had this conversation about was the types of hires that are made, and perhaps more highly skilled labor. So there are opportunities for a lot of people in that whole landscape of workforce. So again, shameless plug. If you have any if you want to be connected with any of those folks, please let me know. I'm happy to do that.
And the reason I bring it up is because if we don't have this workforce, this global trade and investment that we're talking about comes to a standstill, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've been writing a lot. Obviously, as everybody knows, Georgia's trying to become the EV, electric vehicle center of the world, right? We've got all these big plants, thousands and thousands of jobs promised. I'm just looking around saying, where are they going to get them all? We might have to have a lot more New Yorkers coming down. I don't know, but I was in Quebec last year writing about the same topic, and Quebec is fortunate enough to have their own immigration policy because of the specific relationship they have, being a province but also wanting to be a nation. And so Canada allows them to recruit people from Mexico and bring them up to populate the factories. And we've had some Georgia companies that run into issues doing that and doing it disingenuously. So this is going to be a big portion of how we continue to grow this engine that we're always celebrating, but also has some issues in it. Mike, tell us about how much do you personally and the company in general have to follow like geopolitics with what's going on? I mean, obviously the big news this week is around companies or countries pledging to send tanks to Ukraine, et cetera.
Yeah.
I mean, all of this kind of fits into the preparedness that the military has to have, which affects your business. I just wondered, is that something you'll have at the Monday morning meeting, or y'all looking at the front pages of the newspapers, or is it less complicated?
No, it's huge, and with the crisis in Ukraine, it's just heightened actually international cooperation. I never thought countries like Sweden would join NATO, as an example. Sweden and Finland joining NATO, and so that the Russia invasion has really kind of caused nations like Sweden to say, we need to be part of a broader alliance. And when I talk about the F-35 program, which TERMA delivers 80 components on, you have these defense programs that you would think are only U.S. defense programs, but are built to sell internationally to other allies, specifically NATO. So, it's a whole different world. One thing that we do is every year the president signs a National Defense Authorization Act, and it was just done about a month ago. And so what that public document does is it outlines the budget and where the U.S. will spend their money in terms of which agency and department of DoD, but also what activities they're going to use it on. Are they going to buy tanks? Are they going to buy airplanes? Where are they going to use their money? So we pay special attention to that. We visit the military agencies all the time to see what their priorities are. But yeah, it's constantly changing, and it's only heightened with the crisis in Ukraine.
Well, I grew up in Columbus, and Fort Benning being based there. I didn't know it at the time growing up, but there's so much training that happens. For better or worse, some people have protested it, but in Columbus especially. But particularly at Warner Robins, I think the sales of all the international sales that the Air Force does, I think are managed from there. And so you have, when people come in to train on the planes that they're going to be sold, that's where they, I think, a lot of times end up doing it. One of my favorite stories, I don't know if you also serve the C-130.
Yeah, we do.
C-130 is the big cargo planes. Made in Marietta, Georgia, by Lockheed Martin. I went to India and to the Tata Aerospace factory where they're making the tail wings, the empennage, for that factory here in Marietta. And so they send it across the world from India, and they put it there on the assembly line in Georgia. So you never know. Like you said, it's very internationally linked up on the demand and the supply side. But I'm going to open it up for questions. I've chattered on way too much. Michael's going to help us and float the microphone around, and we can pass this one around if you don't mind. Just let us know who your question is for, and make it brief and make it actually a question. No pontification, no speeches.
Hi, I'm James Dutton. I'm from just north of here in Griffin, Georgia. We in Griffin, Georgia, have the Lakes at Green Valley, the only green industrial park in the southeastern United States. What specific green initiatives or green aspects of an industrial park are international businesses looking for? How can we expand this and tailor that to what the international needs are?
Yeah. Regina, you want to take that one, or Mike? I don't know. I can talk about that one. That's fun.
No. Well, actually, Trevor and I have been there to the lakes, and shameless plug, we have a tour at Regina next week, which is part of the park. Beautiful, beautiful park, and also Marucan, which I just learned today I'm saying all wrong. No, the Echo Park, to your point, I'm sorry, what did you say your name is? James. So James, to your point, the Echo Park is beautiful. If you have never, it is, I am correct in saying it's the first one in Georgia. Yeah. First one it's the only, first and only one in Georgia, and it is mostly Japanese companies, I believe, that are there. And if you haven't seen the space, everything is as eco-friendly as possible. Everything from I guess the how it looks to what it does, where it sits. So in my opinion, I think all communities should have there's space for, and there is demand and interest in this in many communities, and it just takes support of the local community, the local
development authorities,
the development authorities, and I think that it's one of those things. This is my opinion. Trevor and I talked about this before. I think it's one of those, if you build it, they'll come type things, and I feel like if you just we started with one, go to another community, and those manufacturers, it would take one just to be interested, and once you get the one buy-in, then the others will come in, and it really is. I know I'm making it probably sound much more simple than it is, but there is interest there, and so it's up to y'all to do it. Y'all just have to go. If they build it, they'll come. I know.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I kept writing about Japanese companies coming there, and I was like,
why aren't other companies
I was checking my work to make sure I wasn't repeating, forgetting that the same company was there, because it was like every 3 or 4 months there was a new company. And if you know about Japanese companies, they value the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's a big push from the Japanese government. And so if you want to align your recruitment efforts to what the governments are doing, sometimes that helps you be in line with what the companies are looking for, you know. But don't let me keep going. Do we want to?
I was just going to say, it's also with rising energy prices. We're seeing that in our factories, not only in the U.S., but in Denmark specifically. There is a need to have more sustainable energy, lower cost energy. So business parks like that, I think, have a big future for also factories as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm Thomas Kissler from the German-American Chamber and represent 600 German, mostly manufacturers in the South. So one big question always, what I hear recently is the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. So what's your take on that? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? Does this apply to the military? Are they exempt? What does it mean to the OEMs you guys work with? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, good question. It might be a Mike question, I don't know. Or from the, we can get the Brazil perspective on whether it's too protectionist or not, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we don't see a huge impact in the aerospace and defense industry. It's actually interesting for me to see if it will actually reduce inflation. So that's an interesting, and we'll have to see. Only time will tell if it will actually reduce inflation. But for us, we are trying to keep costs down by negotiating with suppliers and buying in quantities, higher quantities in bulk, which just increases risk of holding higher inventory, and you may run out of space in factories and things like that. But we are watching also wages very closely. We have seen wages increase. In fact, I was talking about hard to find engineers. We had an offer to a software engineer. Went back to his company and said, I have this offer from TERMA, and they matched it and increased it. So there are issues with inflation in not only labor, but for materials as well. It's just, I'm undecided, and it's to be seen if that will actually reduce inflation for a variety of industries.
Yeah. Well, the big question too is about, you know, climate change climate emission, CO2 emission reduction, and Brazil's an environmental powerhouse. What do y'all think about it, Ambassador Santos? Particularly when it comes to the incentives that are being, spilled out for domestic production in the U.S. Does Brazil see that as problematic?
Well, to begin, I'm a little shy of commenting political issues about the U.S. government, but
tell us what Brazil's doing on climate.
I do agree that I'm not sure it's going to contain inflation, but there's some environmental issues, incentives that could be very interesting, including for the trade between Brazil and the U.S. So we've seen the policy in a good way, but I don't want to.
Yeah, certainly. I get it. We don't want any international incidents here. Reggie, I don't know, did you want to comment on agricultural sector and anything about that? Climate change, anything? How those are affecting it? We didn't really get to actually what your products really do, so maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, we do fertilizers and surfactants, so this is not affecting our business in any way. But agriculture is changing a lot to more environmental friendly. Yeah, that's a trend, and one of the companies. I mean, I work for one of the companies of the group, but Forquímica has another group called Forbio that just work with biochemicals. I mean, you don't need insecticide; you're going to use the bioinsecticide, and for disease control. So there's a lot of things happening in agriculture that's going to change, but instead of like the consul here, he can't be political, but I can be. I say, I'm not political, so I can talk about it. I think there's too many talking about, too many imposing. Sometimes you try to impose something that doesn't work like this. You see what happened to German when they impose of something about the gas. So they quit using some sort. They tried to use the gas, and now they had to go back to coal. So same thing in agriculture. You don't want to impose something. You want to improve something. if you improve, then in Brazil the agriculture is a little more advanced on the biological side. They are working a lot with bioproducts.
And so that you mean like
that's
organic,
going to happen
right?
here. Yeah. We don't call organic, but yes, it is.
Just so we understand it.
Yeah. It's more let's say, not chemicals, but environmental friendly.
Yeah, got it. Any other questions? Yeah, Stanley.
I appreciate it. I had two questions, actually. Mike, do you think TERMA in the near future, because of the next few years, because of the expansion of NATO, will probably see a larger bottom line due to protection from the Russian threat in Ukraine? That's the first question. The second one, I have one for Ambassador Santos.
If we'll see a larger bottom line.
Do you think you'll see a larger bottom line because of that?
Well, it's because we will likely see more purchases,
right.
But it's a heavily regulated industry, and because it's using taxpayer money, the profits are normally regulated, almost like the utility industry. So the government makes sure that some of these aerospace and defense companies are not making huge profits through regulation.
Sure.
But we do see, from a top-line perspective, from a sales perspective, we do see more fighter jets being deployed to allied countries, and because we're a supplier for those fighter jets, we do see that. And we are a supplier to the C-130s that are manufactured in Marietta, Georgia. So if you're from Atlanta, you probably see them flying around your house. We're a supplier there as well. So we do see more countries asking the U.S. government, can we buy your fighter jets or your cargo aircraft?
And the F-35s are mainly of NATO countries, right? I mean,
that's correct.
Okay.
There's 9 countries that are participating.
Yes. And Ambassador Santos, I know, try to stay away from political things, but on January the 8th, do you think, as a global investor, what happened on January the 8th? I know we have our own insurrection from January the 6th, but do you think, as a global investor, that will affect any type of investment in Brazil? I know you have Bolsonaro's is in Florida, and Da Silva, of course, is a new president, but you think no, perhaps?
Thank you for a question. Actually, the answer is clear no. To begin with, the two incidents are alike, okay, but with difference. And the difference where in Brazil, they invaded empty buildings on the Sunday afternoon. They invaded empty buildings, they destroy some things, and they get arrested. They are arrested right now. Like in the US, they are being persecuted, investigation, that's one thing. So nobody dies in the event in Brazil. It happened on a Sunday. On the Monday, the stock didn't change, the currency didn't change, nothing happens. The difference now on the other side, in the case of Brazil, and that's different from the case of the US, there was suspicions about the police not doing their job. And there was suspicions about the army not doing their job because the presidential policy has a battalion, whatever, that's supposed to take care of the palace. That's normal in any country. And they get very, very late. Okay? So what happened? The head of the police of the city is arrested, and there's a big investigation on the police. And what happened with the military? The head of the army that was just Lula was inaugurated on January 1st. This happened 8 days after that. So the head of the army that has at that time 10 days was exonerated, were sent to reserve, and nothing happens. So that's show us that the institutions are very resilient in Brazil. So, and that show too that there was not a big political popular support for radical actions from the right or from the left. And looking on an optimistic view, I have to be optimistic, that's my job. On an optimistic view, the radicals from the right are in prison right now, most of them. And the ones that are not in prison has a good demonstration that, you better not do something strange, or you're going to end up in prison. And the radicals of the left, we do have radicals of the left, are on they're playing the political process. There are left-wing, extreme left-wing parties, even in the president's party, there are people from, let's say, radicals, but they are playing the game, the democratic game, so that's okay. So again, on my optimistic view, actually it was a good event that showed the radicals on the right that, well, you have to play the game, and the game continue with no problem. So I don't foresee any danger for the institutions.
Yeah.
Not at all immediately, and I don't see any long effect on investment.
I loved the response you gave me when I asked this question to you in public, and you said, y'all set a bad example for us.
Yes. Shame on you.
All right, does anybody else have any other questions? Yes, Matilda? Yeah. And then this will probably be the last one, unless there's another quick one, but I'm going to maybe ask them, and we'll wrap it up and go to have our reception.
Yeah, thank you. Yesterday I was actually at the German-American Chamber of Commerce program also, and they were talking about the job situation. And my question is, here in America, we've got like the Latino communities, we've got the African communities. Are you doing anything to engage the community to see if you have the workforce there, both skilled and unskilled? Thank you.
Who's that directed to?
Anybody looking for employees?
Okay. Anybody want to try that? Okay. And then we got Charlotte, I think. Did you want to ask one? Okay.
Yeah, so specifically we're involved in the Robbins Chamber of Commerce and the Georgia State Chamber of Commerce, which provides us with a lot of tools to get into the communities, go to the colleges, to talk about new jobs. What I'm also doing with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce is getting involved in educating people before they go to college about job opportunities, because the answer is not always to go to college and get a 4-year degree. We have a lack of construction workers in Georgia. We have a lack of trades, and we want to give young people the opportunity to have careers in those trades. And so we're trying to do that and be involved with different organizations around Georgia and Atlanta at those early teenager levels to give them those opportunities, because a lot of times they don't know what opportunities are out there.
Yeah.
So if we can get folks excited about different kinds of jobs when they're young, then that gives us a better opportunity to recruit when they're older from a wide variety of districts or cities throughout Georgia.
And I will say that the Germans have done a great job building apprenticeship programs, right, and bringing that model into the Southeast U.S. and establishing it here. So I would say follow Regina if you want to watch this space, because there's always some interesting new workforce development program that has to do with addressing these shortages.
There is, and to your point, one of the things that we do that I think brings in all of those communities is the technical college system is one of our partners as well. And to your point, educating not only the students but their parents about the merits of careers in different in manufacturing and the industrial space has been a key to bringing a whole new generation of interest. And one of the really successful ways to do this is to share what an actual career is and what you need to get into that career. Like, you want to build an airplane? Oh, I didn't know that I could do this. I didn't know that I could go to a technical college and learn this skill. Once someone learns, and whether it's it can be as early as 3rd grade. There are there are 17 technical colleges throughout the state, I believe, and each of them specializes in different areas, whether it's Albany with logistics, or if it's a Lanier Tech or Chattahoochee with aerospace. There's something for everyone. So yeah, to answer your question, there are a lot of ways to do that, and it's coming around more and more. A lot of education on all parties.
Yeah. Charlotte?
Yes. I'm Charlotte Nytoft, and I work with the Danish businesses that are establishing themselves in the U.S. market. And one question to you, Regina. A company that's sitting there looking at the IRA and looking, what is this going to mean for me? What is one good advice for a Danish business looking into the United States and don't really know what to do and think of the IRA?
I think that was you.
Yeah,
One good
Yeah,
piece
we
of
stay
advice.
away from political stuff. I know that's such a good. Yeah, we're not really. I don't really comment on political stuff. Sorry.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to comment?
Well, maybe I don't know. Does anybody else?
We're not. I'm not able to do
Okay.
that.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. One more here. Michael, you got it. Oh, that's okay.
Hi, I'm Tia Logan, an international business major at Wesleyan College. Do you know what industry from Brazil employs the most Georgians?
Good question.
Yes, Pilgrim Pride. 5,000 Georgians.
Pilgrim's Pride is the poultry industry.
Very Brazilian name.
And don't forget, that's JBS, right? All right, well, I'm going to ask one quick question to wrap us up, and then I'll have Chris come back up and close us out. But my one piece of advice question is, what would you say to someone who wants to get involved with international business or just engaging with the world? A lot of times it can seem complicated, it can seem challenging. We like to showcase the opportunity and showcase what you're missing if you're not involved with international business. So if anybody wants to wrap us up with that, then we'll turn it back over to Chris. How do you take the first step? Well, you said it.
Yeah, to involve with international, I can say that it's not easy. Yeah, you gotta know what you're doing. You gotta study where you're going. You gotta know what kind of needs that place you're going to have. Like we came to Georgia to sell here, and now we're selling to Colombia, to Mexico. So it's you'll find places to go. Yeah, when you study the area and you study the needs of each different area that you go, you're gonna find something that is needed, something you can provide and be successful. So.
Yeah. I would encourage everybody to travel, right? It awakens your creativity for sure. Any final thoughts?
I would say it's more than just what you learn about in the textbooks. It's also a lot about culture. So make sure you keep an open mind and you really learn about that country's culture.
Yeah.
So I've worked for Scandinavian parent companies for 20 plus years, and it's important to understand how they make decisions, how they run businesses, what's important to them and what's not. In addition to obviously working with embassies and consulates and everything like that, but really keep an open mind and do a lot of listening and watching for how they conduct themselves culturally.
Yeah, great. Let's give the panel a hand. Thank y'all so much. I really appreciate it.